Welcome back. I appreciate you being here, and in today's video I want to look at a somewhat infamous UFO photo. A lot of people say this is the best UFO photo that's out there, and when it comes to that title, two cases are often listed. One is the Calvine, the Scottish Calvine UFO photo, very famous. I've debunked this in a separate video. I'll link it down in the description so you can check that out yourself. And the other one is the, I don't know how to call it, 1971 Costa Rica UFO. I'll put it on screen here. You may have seen this before. It was taken by an airplane that was flying over Costa Rica to take high-res photos of the landscape, which then would be used in maps. It was basically taken by the National Geographic Institute of Costa Rica, so it's a very respectable source for a photo like that. There's an amazing story behind it. Initially, I wanted to cover this just as 1 out of 3 videos, as I often do in my videos where I debunk 3 clips in one video. But as I was diving deeper into it, there's so much meat to the bone on this one, so much background and interesting stories behind it that I felt like I should do a separate video about it. So in today's video, we're going to dive deep into the story, into the explanations, into the background of this particular photo. But before we do that, I would kindly ask you to smash the like button on the video. It really helps the algorithm out, and it just shows me that you're enjoying the content. Now, before we analyze the photo and I give you a few possible explanations of what we could be looking here, I want to give you guys the background around it, because it is actually really interesting and relevant. And this guy who posted it on Reddit, the name is Sir Gorty, okay? And he was kind enough to give us a little bit of a summary down here that really puts it on point, what happened and how this photo came to be. It's much clearer than I could ever explain it, so I'm just going to read this out to you guys. It's not very long, and it gives you the background that you need to understand where this photo actually comes from. Now, on September 4th, 1971, on board a twin-engine AARO Commander F-680 aeroplane, an automated camera captured an image of a flying saucer. The National Geographic Institute of Costa Rica was studying the potential impact on surrounding land and water of a hydroelectric project in the vicinity of the Arenal volcano in the northern highlands. At 10,000 feet, aerial photographer Sergio Loaiza activated the 100-pound map-making camera. At 20-second intervals, the camera shot images of the water and rainforest in high-resolution black and white. None of the occupants were aware of what the camera had captured that morning, even after the film was developed and the negatives had been filed away. They did not realize what they had captured. So they took these photos, flying over Costa Rica, developed them, put them in a file, stored them away. Nobody really looked at the details. They didn't even notice what they had. Eventually, after pulling out the negatives to study potential ways to connect Lake Cote, which is the lake underneath the object, with the nearby Arenal Lagoon, they noticed the anomalous object hovering over Lake Cote. On frame number 300, with a timestamp of 8:25 a.m., the image shows what appears to be a shiny metallic disc on the right side of the photograph. Over the years, the object size has been estimated to be between 120 and 220 feet in diameter. That's huge. And over the years, the image has also been analyzed by various experts, such as Costa Rican UFO researcher Ricardo Vilches, Dr. Richard Haynes, and famously Dr. Jacques Vallée. They all concluded that the object in the photograph appeared real and was not the result of double exposure or a deliberate fabrication. Now, a few comments on that. First of all, what's interesting is that this was captured on frame 300 of these photos that they took this morning. On frame 299 and frame 301, you see nothing. This object is only visible on this one frame. Again, the camera took these pictures in 20-second intervals. So there's a 20-second interval between each photo. But the photo before this one, and the photo after this, shows absolutely nothing. Now, because this is a somewhat infamous case, you get tweets like this one by UAP Costa Rica, and I don't know who the person behind this account is, but he somehow got hold of the original, or a copy of the original negative of this picture, and you can see how big it is for a photographic negative. I'm old enough to actually remember negatives that would come out of your camera, and they would be more like this size, and I mean, this is huge. And the photo that we looked at earlier is literally just this little crop over here on the, well, if you spin it to the right-hand side of the image. So the actual image is much bigger, and we're really just looking at a crop. But the advantage of having such a high-res negative is that we can get hold of a high-res scan of this negative, because Esteban Carranza, and I don't know if it's the guy behind this account or someone else, he sent this photo to a photo laboratory in Kansas to get it scanned at high resolution and cleaned up, and he made that copy available for us online. So I have the photo here. It is a 1.7 gigabyte scan of this particular image, and you can see as we're zooming in here, you get quite a lot of detail. Keep in mind this was taken 1971, so camera technology was nowhere near to where it is today, but still, right, as we're looking at this, you get a lot of detail of the landscape, because again, it was all, you know, photographed to create maps from it, so they needed that level of detail. But as you zoom over to the right hand side, this somewhat mysterious object comes into sight, and it really does look like some kind of silver disc. It looks like it's tilted, right? It's not like front on from the top. It seems somewhat tilted because the bottom of it seems to dissipate. It seems to fade away at the 6 o'clock position down here. We can't really see the whole object, if it is an object. But before we get into the possible explanations of what we might be looking at here, I want to have a quick word on these experts, these alleged experts, specifically Richard Haynes and Jacques Vallée, who wrote a piece about this. And I'll link this document, which has been written by F. Haynes and Jacques Vallée, about this specific incident in the description. You can check it out for yourself if you want to read all these pages. Feel free to do that. The document is titled Photo Analysis of an Aerial Disc over Costa Rica. It's been written in 1989, so it's a few years old, but they go into quite excruciating detail around analyzing this particular photo, breaking it down. I had a read through it. They give you the geographic locations where it was taken and all that. So if you want to read it, feel free to do that. However, I want to highlight a few questions around this. Okay, so here we have Richard Haynes and Jacques Vallée writing this 19-page analytical document around this particular photograph, because ultimately that's all it is. It's a photograph. So my question is, are they experts? Are they experts in photography? Are they experts in physics? No, they're not. Okay, Richard Haynes has a PhD in experimental psychology, and Jacques Vallée, who has 2 PhDs, one in industrial engineering and one in computer science. Okay, so none of these people really have the credentials to claim to be experts in this field. I'm not questioning that they did a good job with this particular document. It goes into a lot of depth, and I don't doubt that they try to do the best effort they can. But truth is, while they are definitely experts in the fields I just listed, they are not experts in photography or analyzing photos or photographic technology or physics at that matter. So in my opinion, as nice as this document is, and I read through the whole thing, they don't really have the credentials to claim to be experts in this specific field. However, they are ufologists, okay? And to me, that already gives them a little bit of a bias. But let's get into analyzing this photo. I want to give you guys 3 possible explanations of what we might be looking here when it comes to this silver disc in this photo captured over Costa Rica in 1971. Number 1, the first possible option of what we might be looking at here, and this is probably amongst the skeptics the most popular solution, that it's basically a trapped particle. It's a little bit of junk, a little bit of lint or something that was captured between the film and the camera plate. You saw it, right? It was a big camera. I mean, we heard it weighs 100 pounds. It's a heavy and big camera. It had a big camera plate. And if you would get like a little bit of lint or some grain or dust in between the film and the camera plate, it would raise up the camera plate and almost create a little bit of a bubble. And I found this lovely, what he was calling debunk in this post on Reddit, like someone was explaining how the actual object is distorted, right? And that it looks much more like something that is actually like a little object. You see the dark spot in the middle, that would be the object. And what sits around it is basically a bubble in the camera plate or in the film. It just lifts it up ever so slightly, creating this distortion. And there is a point to be made to say there is clearly some kind of dark object in the center of this irregularity, which means that there probably was something physical there. Like I said, like a bit of lint or something that just lifted up the camera plate or the film and created a little bubble within the emulsion, basically. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the high-res scan of this negative was sent to a photo laboratory in Kansas, and this is the photo laboratory that was sent to, michaelstricklandimages.com. Apparently, this is the guy who scanned it, who cleaned it up, who worked on the image as well. Now, that's all nice and good, but here's a slight problem with that, because him having worked on this image gives us some insight into the metadata of the picture, and we can actually see what kind of work he did on it. You can go to Photoshop and bring up the file info, and you will see, look at this, the healing brush. Okay, the healing brush is basically a tool. I'll show you. I'll demonstrate the healing brush to you guys. I can just quickly select this object, do this, and it's gone. You'll never know that it was here, okay? This is the healing brush. I mean, this particular tool I'm using here is the patch tool, but it does the same thing, okay? The healing brush goes over parts of an image and cleans it up based on information that you find somewhere else in the image. And you can see in the metadata of this image that the healing brush was used 3,672 times on this image. So that means, look, I don't know who did it, but someone went heavily to work on this image with the healing brush, cleaning up a lot of stuff. And I don't know what was cleaned up. What's interesting is in the original Reddit post, the image they are showing is much lower in resolution, but you get much more scratchy details of the original film, like these lines here. And I don't know what they are, whether they are like the rollers that kind of move the film through, because this object was captured really on the edge of the film. It's almost that close that it might be a part of the film that you normally would crop off. So it is possible that this healing brush was just used to remove all these scratches and imperfections, but we simply don't know. All we know is this picture has been heavily altered with Photoshop tools. And that also becomes clear when we're looking closer at some of the details of this high-res scan, okay? I want you to look at some of the details up here. Okay, look at this here. Do you see this? There's a little bubble here, right? There's a bubble here, then there's a bubble there, and I'm going to remove these white lines now. Do you see this? They are almost identical, right? You see these spots in here. This is exactly what this patch tool or the healing brush does. It takes information from somewhere else in the image and plasters it over that spot. So whoever did this did not a particularly good job in hiding the traces of their work. Same down here, right? There's another bubble here. There are little smudges down here that are not consistent with the grain of the image. Do you see this? Everywhere you look are these small patches that are not consistent with the image. And I can show you what I mean. Let me bring out the patch tool again. So over here, you can see this little smudge down here, right? You can see it's inconsistent with the surroundings, right? If I mark that with the patch tool and now bring it over to somewhere here, now it filled it up with the same grain texture. But clearly, whoever did this did not a proper job, and he left, especially around this object, all kinds of traces of smudges where he didn't clean it up properly. And it just makes me wonder what's going on here, right? Like, why has this been done? Is it just to remove the scratches, the inconsistencies? But the whole grain texture around this object looks like a step and repeat pattern of almost the same grain. Like, it's been clearly heavily meddled with. Also, here's another thing I noticed when I looked that close at the object. Notice that in the center here, seems to be, I don't know, it almost looks a bit like a string. Do you see that? It goes this way. And I'm going to switch it off so you can see it. Do you see this? At least down here, you see there's some kind of string or some kind of pin or something that is irregular. It just doesn't make sense. So beyond there being this alleged explanation of it just being some kind of lint or an object, a bit of junk that is sitting on the processing plate, raising up the plate or the film, creating a little bubble that would create this kind of effect. There are also other inconsistencies, like the Photoshop metadata, like the smudging all around it. It's clearly been heavily meddled with, like that string-like thing that's sitting here. It's just visual inconsistencies where I'm looking at this and it's like, this is not just some silvery disc flying through the sky. There are other questions here. So this is kind of the first explanation that a lot of skeptics put out there and say that's what it is. Okay, it's just some lint, some dirt, basically a bubble in the film emulsion, creating this effect, this illusion of it being a silvery disc. Now, the second explanation is regarding the light. Because if you look at the landscape that we have here, right, and luckily we have a lot of detail on this landscape, you can quite clearly see where the light is coming from. Like here, for example, we can see a little raised area in the landscape. It's a small hill. This here is the darkest spot in the hill. This here seems to be a somewhat tall tree that casts a long shadow going that way, but also these lines of bushes over here cast their shadow I don't know if this is the south, but like the 6 o'clock position, or maybe like the 7, 8 o'clock position, right? It seems like the light in this image is coming roughly from this kind of position up here, right? This is the angle of the light. This is how the shadows fall, and it's all indicated by all of it, including the geometry, right? If you look at this, seems to be some kind of building. So the light comes from this angle, casting the shadow down here. However, that's not reflected in the image. Do you see this? If the light would be coming from up here, what is north, or like the 12 o'clock position in this particular rotation of the image, this side should be bright, but it's really not. The other side is bright, the exact opposite side of where the light is coming from in the whole rest of the image is illuminated in what seems to be this object. So the object really does not match its surroundings very well, because the light is almost inverted in the object. You know what I mean? The top side should be illuminated, but the lower side, the 6 o'clock side, is. So what causes inverted lights? A transparent object. If you look at, for example, how water droplets work, you can see this effect here very clearly, okay? You can see that we're looking at the sky, right? There's some landscape that's kind of in blue in this particular picture, and then you have the sky that's very bright and white in this specific photo. But what these water droplets do is they reverse this effect, okay? The bottom of the water droplet is white as the sky, and the top of it reflects the landscape, and that is pretty much what we see in this image. It's the same effect, okay? It's illuminated as the sky would north of it on the bottom at the 6 o'clock position, and it is dark where it should be bright. So it does have the exact characteristica of a water droplet, which is probably blown away after 20 seconds, right? There's a lot of wind, you're flying at 10,000 feet. A water droplet could just be in the right position at the right moment. It's a huge coincidence, and you get an effect like that. And it would most certainly be gone after 20 seconds after the second image, one after that, is taken. So a lot of people also speculate whether it might be a water droplet that just has the illusion, it gives the illusion of it being a silvery disc. In my opinion, that would make a lot of sense. I'm still more leaning towards there being some kind of object and it basically being a bubble in the film emulsion. But I mean, let me know by all means what you guys think it is at this point, because there is still a third option, okay? A third option of what we might be looking at here, and that is a metal rivet that is basically falling off the airplane right in that moment. So airplanes use metal rivets like these ones. They are bolted to the exterior of the plane. Usually they don't fall off, but that doesn't mean that would never happen. It can happen in certain specific circumstances. And if you would have a little rivet like this falling down and being captured mid-air exactly in the right moment, it's a huge coincidence, right? That it falls off, flies in front of the camera. That camera exactly exposes that shot in that microsecond where it's there. Obviously, it would not be in the shot before or after that, because it then falls to the ground and lands somewhere, probably in the lake. But it makes a lot of sense. Also note that the object itself is pretty sharp, but it's not as sharp as some of the landscape that you see next to it, right? You can see here, like in almost every single hill, the camera has clearly been adjusted to be focused on the landscape at 10,000 feet underneath, while the edges of this object seem to be less sharp, right? It is not out of focus, but it is not as sharp as the landscape, which indicates that it might be an object that is closer to the camera. And to me, I mean, it always looked like some kind of button that you may use in upholstery or something like that. That was my initial response as I was zooming into that and looking closely at it. But these are the three options that I could source, and that would make sense to me. One being a film artifact, the second one basically being a water droplet, and the third one being a metal rivet that is falling off the airplane. I mean, by all means, let me know which one of these is most likely to you. Maybe you think it's all nonsense. Maybe you think it's definitely aliens. I mean, by all means, leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'm not judging you if you disagree with my points. But generally, always when I look at images like this or videos of UFOs and so on, alleged UFOs, it kind of has to pass the logical sniff test for me. And to think that some unidentifiable blob on an old film photo must be an alien spacecraft from some kind of interstellar planet, when also there are plenty of other more earthly explanations on the table. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And also, I mean, look at it. Why would aliens from another galaxy fly around in a tin can like that? You know what I mean? It looks outdated. It looks silvery. One argument that I found particularly amusing, especially when talking about the light bouncing off the exact opposite way as it would be of an object that we know, the sun in the specific case, that people make online, a lot of believers make, they say, well, it's an alien spacecraft. You don't know how light that hits an alien spacecraft would behave. I mean, due to the bubble of gravity that sits around the spacecraft, it might just have the exact opposite effect and not follow the laws of physics. And it's like, yeah, all right, we're gasping at straws at this point. So to me, with the explanations that I've listed on the table, plus the looks of it, as I said, why would these aliens come here in a tin can like that? It just does not pass the logical sniff test to me. I can't say that I've debunked this specific object. I'm not saying it's undebunkable, but I mean, it is a very old photo and it is tricky to put sense, like definitely conclusive sense into an image like that. To me, though, it might be one of the three explanations that I listed. It might be something else. But what it is most definitely not in my mind is an alien spacecraft flying over Costa Rica. Okay, that's just my opinion. Feel free to disagree. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. I would greatly appreciate that. Again, if you enjoyed the video, smash the like button. I would love to see you in another one, so consider subscribing. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the description. I'll see you in the next one. I'm out. Bye.